This is the Anbernic RG SLIDE. This is a device that, truthfully, I'm super happy that Anbernic has made this. We need to back up a little bit. I love slider designs. I love clamshells. If you know me long enough, I will always talk positively about sliders and clamshells. But we need to go back in history a little bit, because if you do not know, I had made a video about this, but I also did this 18 years ago or something, way in the long ago. There was the Samsung Galaxy Epic 4G. That was effectively a different variant of the Samsung Galaxy S that came out, like, the very first, like, this is when smartphones were getting super really awesome and cool. And basically, I just ripped off all the keys for them and called it a gamepad. I had done a video on it, and Gadget did a little blog post calling me a power mad modder. I'm just telling you this because I have done videos in the long ago, always trying to get closer and closer to having a slider gaming phone. Unironically, if Anbernic had made a real gaming phone, I would very much use it. Now, I think that in a 4x3 type of form factor for the display, this is a bit too wide to be using as a phone. But if Anbernic, used a standard screen and also had like just one really good camera, yeah, I would unironically use an Anbernic phone. Plus, this sliding action is just like exactly how you know it to be from other types of sliders. I also think that if it wasn't as wide, there's just lots of benefits, obviously, outside of just using it as a phone. So the thickness for this thing is honestly something that I am totally okay with, and this is a compromise for sliders that I've long known, is that it would be thick if you wanted to have halfway decent analog sticks, because you don't really want sliders there just in the sake of thinness. That's compromising too much. I would much rather have thickness, and we could also make a benefit of having a bigger battery, as well as, if this was actually a sliding gaming phone, we could have a fairly decent sized camera on there as well without having it to protrude outward. So there's lots of interesting benefits that we can get out of there, but ultimately this is close to what I would love to have for a real gaming phone. Now, this is not a phone, and if Anbernic wanted to go down that route, they could also do what they do for, like, sometimes these devices, they'll have like 4G internet. So the network part, the cellular side, can work, but it doesn't work for a phone. However, some enterprising individuals could make custom firmware that would allow the phone to work. So I think that would be a way to let us have our cake and eat it too, is for Anbernic to make a 4G internet connected device that is like a sliding gaming phone. It looks like a sliding gaming phone, but it's only 4G internet. But when it got into individuals' hands, that's when they could make it an actual gaming phone. So fingers crossed that actually happens. Let's quickly get into the specs, and then I will talk briefly about like what this is. This is really just going to be a quick look. There'll be a full-on review later on. The screen on this thing is truly amazing, and I'm going to show off a few examples here, and I'll talk about that pretty much at length here. But this is a 4.7-inch LTPS in-cell display with full laminations. That just means that how the glass and the display are fused together, it makes it so that it's super clean. There is no separation between those and the digitizer. It is a 4x3 screen with a 1280 by 960 resolution. I feel like I said that sometime just not too long ago. And arguably the bigger feature here is that this has a maximum refresh rate of 120 hertz. And why that matters is because we can enable BFI like in RetroArch, and it just looks, the motion clarity that is possible on this display, it has to be seen to be believed. And what I am hoping is that, obviously Anbernic is going to be making more devices, but I think we all can count on that. This 4x3 display should be in other devices, 100%. It should not just be in this slider. It's making its debut here. And for what it's worth, I genuinely love this because there's nothing protruding from here, so it's far more easily pocketable. The dimensions for having this size is going to be overall smaller than a lot of other like candy bar ones. You're going to be, either wider, or if you're going to be vertical, you're going to be taller. You're going to be using up space, and there's going to be protruding analog sticks. It's not going to be as easy to pocket. And this is. So that's why sliders and clamshells are just generally awesome, is form factor in terms of overall volume, and what you get out of them are superior, and they're easier to pocket. So I'm just always a big fan of it, and you'll always hear me say these things. We are using that T820 processor, and this has been a chip used in previous Anbernic devices, so we don't have the newer one. We are using Android 13 here as a result instead of the latest version of Android. The bigger part here is that we have those A76 cores that are going to be driving a lot of the high-end emulation. And for what it's worth, we can actually do quite a bit here. Again, that's going to be more for a full review. This is just going to be a quick look, so we're just going to keep on going down the specs. We have 8 gigs of LPDDR4X RAM, 128 gigs of UFS 2.2. I've already told you it was Android 13. For Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, for Wi-Fi, we have 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz support. For what it's worth, I have Wi-Fi 6 throughout my house, and I didn't have any particular issue using this at all. I know there were some people asking questions, but I didn't really. It just kind of worked just fine. A newer feature that's going to be showing up on Anbernic devices is their Anbernic AI, and there are some interesting things here, but I'm going to be leaning on that more on the full review. There are some cool things you can do, like real-time translation. So if you're playing Japanese games and you want to translate to English, it can actually do that, and it's pretty interesting. Well, again, this is going to go be more onto the full review. For the analog sticks, they're high-resolution anti-magnetic interference capacitive joysticks. So these analog sticks right here, for the form factor and how the weight is dispersed all over, they're pretty good to use, actually. I was finding myself not struggling with use, like, if you're just pushing them more and they're super sensitive. I was able to finesse them a lot easier than normal. And again, we'll talk about the specifics more in a full review, but overall, the complement of controllers, Anbernic does a very good job because they've done so many. And this particular D-pad, there is no complaints I particularly have. If any complaint that I had, it was just that these are inline shoulders, and I think that was really just in an effort to have it be more streamlined instead of having something poking out. And last but not least, obviously, is we have a heatsink and fan, because that is needed to have consistent performance, especially because when you're in Android here, you can swipe down, you can click high performance mode, and that will kick those cores into a high performance state more often. And that really is needed for playing PlayStation 2 games and GameCube games. It's going to allow you to make those far more playable after twiddling some settings. So that's pretty much the specs. What I want to jump into first is this display. So one thing that is the standout feature here is being able to use BFI. So BFI is black frame insertion, and with 120 hertz, you're driving the display at 120 frames a second. And what BFI does is, especially if you do one BFI, one black frame insertion, is you'll insert a black frame, so you'll black out the screen in between every other frame. So how you enable that is you go into the settings of Android and make sure you're at 120 hertz mode. After that, you're going to go into RetroArch, you go to video synchronization, and then you click on the black frame insertion, and then you click the one option. This is to do 120 to 60, right? And then from there, what you're going to be looking at, and I'm going to try my best to communicate to you why that matters so much. This will give you motion clarity, so that everything that you see on there is very, very pleasing to the eye. And for a lot of 4x3 content, it really makes a giant difference. And especially when here's one thing I'm going to show a brief demo, is some older TV shows. So this is going to be Computer Chronicles. And it is in a 4x3 output. That's how it was displayed long, long ago. And if you put other shaders on top of it with BFI to give it more of a CRT look, it has a deceptive feeling that you're almost looking at a portable CRT with you, and it is genuinely a pleasure to look at. So here's a short demo that I'd love to show you.
Instituted the link between the mechanical world and the world of the most abstract concepts. That currently, in the modern terminology, is called the physical symbol system hypothesis, and is the basis for artificial intelligence work. In artificial intelligence as a science, we talk about the use of computers to process symbolic knowledge using logical inference methods, symbolic inference methods. In other words, we're talking about inference and not calculation. And
ultimately, what that comes down to is that this display is just a joy to use. It is a genuine pleasure, and it is very pleasing to the eye in a lot of respects, even for high resolution 4x3 content and stretching that out. Even if you wanted to do Game Boy Advance and you wanted to do integer-based stuff, it scales really nice on this display as well. It doesn't have giganto borders around it. You're not wasting a ton of space when you put integer scaling on GBA games. And with BFI, it can be honestly super pleasant to look at. So even if you weren't thinking like, well, what other things that have not 4:3 aspect ratios, especially for GBA, it is super nice on this display. When we talk about like PlayStation 2, there are obviously you're going to need to tweak and fiddle, and we'll get into those specifics later. But the end result is that it is 100% possible to play a number of PS2 and GameCube games. Now, you're not going to be able to play all of them, but there are quite a number that are playable. The things that you're going to probably have to start doing is start dabbling into like old school methods, like using PAL-based games that will do 50 FPS as their target instead of hitting 60 FPS. Even if the resolution on PAL games would be a tiny bit larger, overall hitting a 50 FPS cap is overall easier. So these are some methods that you may have to dabble into for certain games. Not everyone's. There's quite a lot that will just play just fine, but just to give you an example. The last thing I'd like to touch base on this quick look is the usability of this. Now, I have been using this at length for the past few days, and initially, the weight distribution, when you slide this up, especially because it's so tall, the weight distribution feels a little weird, but I quickly acclimated to it. And when actually using it, again, as I said earlier on in this video, with the analog sticks being something that I could finesse fairly easily, I think it has a lot to do with the weight distribution. The only thing that I would say is, especially when using analog sticks, I really wish that there were actual triggers, because trying to fiddle around and finding where these inline triggers are, it becomes not the best experience. However, I will say that I don't think that Anbernic made that choice lightly, especially because when you take a look at this, you can see that Anbernic had a lot of conceptual ideas for how this would actually be used in reality. And what I mean by that is they actually have buttons next to the front-firing speakers so that you can actually do inputs. So this will give you into the RG, the retro game kind of front end for Anbernic. So if you were just to hold this down, it would jump that over, so you can just get that real quick. The other thing that would be here is the back button. So you can press this button, which makes it easier so that in this very tablet-like interface form factor, when you have it slid down, that you can quickly and easily use these face buttons to give Android buttons. And this back button I've been using all the time, and it's super helpful. But it's the kind of thing where you can see that Anbernic had a lot of foresight into thinking about where these should be placed, because if every time you had to interact with Android, you had to slide it up, that would kind of suck. And it shows you that Anbernic is not just cranking these out. They do crank them out, but they do put a lot of thought into them. So I think overall, I'm a big fan of the RG Slide, and this is where I would like to kind of leave off my quick look. I'm a big fan of it. There's going to be a full review later on, because that's set for a later date. But right now, where this is, it's a chunky boy, but I am so glad that Anbernic has entered into the sliding form factor. I've been sliding up and down. It has those two spring coils internally. At least I believe so, because that's what it feels like. And it's a joy to use. I haven't found any particular issue at all with it just yet, but I've only been able to use it for 2 days right now, and it's been fine and operating like most slide devices do. So that's going to be it for my quick look on the Anbernic RG Slide. Thank you very much to my YouTube channel members as well as my Patreon members. Your support really means the world to me, guys. I hope this video was informative. As always, guys, thank you for your time. Thanks for watching.